Just 1 minute ago, the unthinkable happened. In a move no one saw coming, Princess Anne broke ranks and pulled back the curtain on a secret that has haunted the palace corridors since the death of Prince Philip. What she revealed wasn't just a family dispute, it was an accusation of betrayal at the highest level. And if her claims are true, the monarchy has been sitting on a scandal that could rewrite royal history forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The words did not come wrapped in hesitation. They came sharp, controlled, deliberate. For decades, Princess Anne had been known as the monarchy's steel spine, disciplined, loyal, unshakably private. She had endured crises without spectacle, navigated controversies without complaint, and guarded family matters with near-military precision. That is precisely why this moment detonated like a thunderclap. When someone so fiercely protective of royal protocol decides to speak, it is never impulsive. It is strategic. Anne did not merely reference her father's final wishes, she invoked them like a sacred oath. She reminded those present that Prince Philip was not only a consort, not merely a supporting figure to a queen, but a man who spent a lifetime defending the institution from erosion. His final testament, she insisted, was crafted with clarity and conviction. Every clause, every signature, every directive was deliberate. And yet, according to her explosive claim, something shifted after his passing. Subtle changes, quiet reinterpretations, language softened, intent blurred. What had once been unmistakably firm now appeared curiously flexible. Inside palace walls, the reaction was immediate but not unified. There was panic, yes, but also something colder. Strategic silence. Statements were drafted and redrafted. Advisors huddled in hushed clusters, not to refute her outright, but to calculate the damage. Because Anne's accusation was not vague. She suggested that trusted insiders, people whose loyalty had never before been questioned, had attempted to alter Philip's testament under the guise of administrative refinement, a technical adjustment, perhaps a necessary clarification. But Anne framed it differently. She called it interference. She called it dishonor. The emotional weight of that word hung heavily. Dishonor. It was not simply about inheritance. It was not about jewels, estates, or ceremonial titles. It was about power who shapes it, who inherits it, and who dares to redirect it when the architect is no longer alive to defend it. Anne implied that Philip's final instructions contained more than personal bequests. They carried vision, direction, warnings, and somewhere between his final signature and the palace's public narrative, that vision had allegedly been diluted. What makes this moment so combustible is not just the allegation, it is the timing. Anne waited. She observed. She gathered her resolve like a seasoned tactician. Those close to her say she wrestled with the decision, fully aware that speaking out would fracture the illusion of unity the monarchy depends upon. But in her view, silence would have been a deeper betrayal. If her father's words were being reshaped behind closed doors, then protocol became secondary to principle. And then came the most chilling implication of all, a hidden document, a version of the testament preserved in its original form, untouched, unedited. A document that, according to Anne, contradicts the official interpretation currently guiding palace operations. She did not reveal its contents outright, but she did not need to. The mere suggestion that such a document exists was enough to shift the balance, because if there are two versions of Prince Philip's final wishes, then someone, somewhere, made a choice to protect one and obscure the other. And that choice transforms this from a family disagreement into a calculated struggle over the monarchy's future direction. But to understand why Anne chose this precise moment to strike, we must revisit the final days of Prince Philip, days shrouded in secrecy, tension, and a document that may never have been meant to see the light of day, as Prince Philip's health quietly declined. Few realized he was drafting something that would outlive him, a final testament, rumored to be sharper than any sword and more decisive than any crown decree. What was written inside that sealed document has allegedly triggered panic among senior officials. And now, thanks to Princess Anne, whispers of manipulation have turned into a full-blown reckoning. In those final months, access narrowed, conversations shortened, schedules tightened with an almost surgical precision. The Duke, long known for his directness, did not retreat into passivity. Instead, he grew more focused. Those closest to him noticed it immediately. Meetings once considered routine became deliberate. Notes were dictated, reviewed, revised. Legal counsel was summoned not for ceremony, but for clarity. Every word mattered. Every clause was scrutinized. There would be no ambiguity, no space for reinterpretation at least. That was his intention. The atmosphere surrounding him was heavy but disciplined. Communication channels were carefully controlled, and even within palace walls, information flowed in measured drops. Not everyone was granted access. Not everyone was invited to observe the drafting process. It was said that Philip insisted on privacy, not out of secrecy, but out of precision. He had seen enough internal maneuvering over the decades to understand how easily why intent could be diluted once the author was no longer present to defend it, and so he guarded this document fiercely. Allegations now suggest that he personally oversaw every sentence, that he refused vague phrasing, that he challenged legal advisors until each paragraph reflected exactly what he envisioned for the monarchy's future stability. This was not merely a distribution of possessions. It was a blueprint, a statement of philosophy, a final attempt to fortify the institution he had spent a lifetime supporting from the shadows. And within that blueprint, according to growing whispers, were directives that unsettled more than a few powerful figures, because under the testament's original terms, influence would not flow where some had assumed it would. Certain individuals, long accustomed to shaping strategy behind closed doors, stood to lose quiet authority. Advisory roles would shift, oversight would tighten, lines of accountability would sharpen. It was not explosive in a theatrical sense, but in a structural one, subtle adjustments that, over time, could alter the internal balance of power. And that possibility alone was enough to cause unease. At the heart of it all stood Princess Anne. Their bond had always transcended protocol. Philip recognized in her the same discipline, the same intolerance for weakness, disguised as diplomacy. In those final weeks, conversations between father and daughter reportedly carried a different tone, less ceremonial, more urgent. He did not simply share memories, he shared concerns. He spoke of endurance, of duty, of safeguarding principle over popularity. If he was choosing a moral anchor for the monarchy's future, many believe he had already decided who it would be. There are even claims that the testament named a guardian not of assets, but of values, a protector of the monarchy's moral compass, tasked not with control, but vigilance. Such a designation would not elevate someone ceremonially, but it would empower them symbolically. It would send a message that legacy is measured in integrity, not position. And if that clause existed in its purest form, it would explain why altering even a single phrase could shift everything. Because once Philip placed his final signature on that document, he believed his intentions were sealed, clear, undeniable. Yet somewhere between Philip's final signature and the palace's official announcement, something changed, and that change would ignite the fury of the one royal who refuses to be silenced. Imagine discovering that your father's final words were quietly rewritten behind closed doors. That is the accusation now echoing through royal halls. Princess Anne's claim is simple but devastating. Someone attempted to alter Prince Philip's final testament, not for clarity, not for legal necessity, but for control. And the deeper this story goes, the more it suggests a coordinated effort that reached further than anyone dared imagine. What began as a whisper about minor discrepancies has now evolved into a timeline that refuses to sit neatly. Philip's testament was signed, witnessed, and sealed with the solemnity reserved for history. The date was clear. The language was firm. Yet when the palace later released its carefully measured summary, subtle shifts emerged, phrases softened, directives reinterpreted, certain emphases quietly diluted. On paper, nothing appeared explosive, but when Anne compared the original drafting notes to the public framing, the cracks became impossible to ignore. There were legal revisions, we are told, but not the kind born from necessity. These were adjustments categorized as administrative refinements, introduced after Philip's passing. That timing alone raised alarms. Why refine what had already been finalized? Why reinterpret language that the Duke himself had scrutinized word by word? According to insiders sympathetic to Anne's position, the changes were not cosmetic. They redirected emphasis. They reshaped authority. They softened provisions that once carried unmistakable weight. The explanation offered by palace officials was polished and calm. Procedures evolve. Circumstances shift. Context demands flexibility. But Anne saw something else entirely. She saw intent being blurred. She saw decisive statements being converted into negotiable interpretations. And for a woman who understood her father's uncompromising nature, that transformation felt like betrayal. Philip was many things, but vague was never one of them. If he had intended nuance, he would have written it. At the heart of this storm lies motive. Under the testament's original structure, certain advisory powers were reportedly redistributed. Oversight mechanisms tightened. Informal influence, long exercised through tradition rather than formal decree, would have faced new boundaries. For those who thrived within those unwritten spaces, the Duke's clarity posed a threat. And so the allegation now forming suggests a quiet effort to preserve existing power structures under the cover of procedural housekeeping. Anne's fury was not theatrical. It was personal. She had witnessed her father's discipline in those final weeks. She had heard the emphasis in his voice when he spoke of legacy, of protecting the institution from internal complacency. To her, this was not a bureaucratic dispute. It was a defense of integrity. The emotional betrayal cut deeper because it came from within, not from critics, but from individuals entrusted to safeguard the monarchy's stability. Whispers of internal factions are no longer dismissed as gossip. There are traditionalists who believe authority should remain concentrated among seasoned courtiers. There are reformists who argue that modernization requires recalibration of influence. And somewhere between those camps lies the Duke's final testament, now positioned as both shield and weapon. If certain clauses truly redirected oversight, then altering their interpretation would quietly restore the old equilibrium. What makes this accusation combustible is not just the act itself, but its symbolism. Changing a man's final words even subtly crosses an invisible line. It suggests that legacy is negotiable, that authority can be massaged after the fact. And in a monarchy built upon continuity and trust, that perception alone is destabilizing. Anne understood that remaining silent would allow ambiguity to harden into accepted truth. So she chose confrontation. And as accusations grew louder, the question became unavoidable: who stood to benefit most if Philip's original intentions were quietly erased? Behind every royal decree stands a network of advisors, courtiers, and strategists. They do not wear crowns, but they shape them. Princess Anne's explosive revelation points not at a single rogue actor, but at a circle of influence operating in the shadows. If her claims are accurate, this was no clerical error. It was a calculated maneuver to steer the monarchy's future. The public sees ceremony, continuity, polished statements. What it does not see is the intricate hierarchy humming beneath it all, a lattice of private secretaries, legal consultants, senior courtiers, constitutional advisors, and legacy guardians who quietly influence how royal intention becomes royal action. These figures rarely appear in headlines, yet their proximity to power gives them extraordinary leverage. They interpret, they filter, they advise. And in moments of transition, interpretation can become transformation. For decades, two currents have flowed beneath the monarchy's surface. Traditionalists, devoted to preserving inherited structures exactly as they stand, believe stability depends on continuity without deviation. Reformists, more pragmatic, argue that survival demands recalibration, strategic modernization, and subtle shifts in internal authority. Neither faction declares itself openly, but their philosophies shape conversations behind closed doors. Philip understood this tension intimately. He had watched it evolve across generations. His final testament, if Anne is to be believed, did not ignore that fault line, it addressed it directly. Allegations now suggest that only fragments of his directives were fully disclosed, Certain clauses were emphasized in official summaries, while others were reportedly contextualized into near invisibility. Not erased outright, not deleted in bold strokes, but repositioned in ways that softened their force. Selective disclosure can be more powerful than deletion because it preserves plausible deniability. It allows those in control of the narrative to claim transparency while quietly guiding perception. The timing raises its own shadow. The revisions did not occur during Philip's lifetime, when he could contest interpretation. They emerged after his passing, during a period when grief clouded scrutiny and the public appetite for stability outweighed the hunger for detail. It was, from a strategic standpoint, the perfect moment to recalibrate without triggering immediate alarm. Anne, however, was not distracted by ceremony. She was watching the paperwork, watching the phrasing, watching the quiet recalculations that others assumed would go unnoticed. There are whispers that she received private warnings, not threats, but cautions, suggestions that challenging the revised interpretation would fracture unity at a sensitive time, that raising concerns would appear disloyal, that stability required discretion. But to Anne, silence was not discretion, it was complicity. The more she examined the divergence between original drafting notes and the circulated interpretation, the clearer it became that this was not a single oversight. It was a pattern. What terrifies the palace most is not the accusation itself, but what it implies. If a duke's final wishes can be subtly redirected through bureaucratic maneuvering, then what becomes of royal legitimacy? The monarchy survives on continuity and trust, the belief that its word, once given, stands immovable. The fear now rippling through its inner chambers is that public awareness of internal manipulation, even alleged manipulation, could erode that foundation more effectively than any external criticism ever could. Anne's stand therefore transcends family loyalty. It challenges an ecosystem. It questions whether those entrusted with preserving the crown have begun preserving their own influence instead. And that question carries consequences that stretch far beyond one testament. But Anne did not act impulsively. She waited, gathered proof, and when the moment came, she chose confrontation over compromise. There is an unspoken rule within the monarchy: disputes remain private. Princess Anne shattered that rule. In a private council meeting that insiders describe as tense beyond repair, she allegedly laid out evidence that Philip's testament had been tampered with. Voices were raised, allegiances tested, and for the first time in years, the palace walls echoed with open defiance from one of its most steadfast figures. She did not arrive with emotion alone. She arrived with documents, drafting notes, marked copies, dates circled with deliberate precision. Anne, often underestimated by those who mistake silence for passivity, methodically walked those present through the discrepancies, line by line, clause by clause. She pointed to phrasing that had once been absolute and now read as conditional. She highlighted structural adjustments that seemed minor in isolation, but seismic when placed against the Duke's original framework. This was not a theatrical outburst. It was a controlled dismantling of an official narrative. Then came the invocation that changed the temperature in the room. She spoke of her father not as a public figure, but as a man who had dedicated his life to safeguarding the crown from erosion. She reminded them of his discipline, his intolerance for ambiguity, his insistence that leadership must be anchored in clarity. To suggest that his final instructions required reinterpretation was, in her words, to suggest that he had been careless in his last act of duty. And that she would not accept. The reaction from senior courtiers was immediate and fractured. Some appeared stunned, blindsided by the precision of her preparation. Others stiffened defensively, insisting that procedural adjustments were both legal and necessary. There were attempts to redirect the conversation toward unity, toward optics, toward the greater good, but Anne refused abstraction. She kept returning to specifics, to the ink, to the sequence of events, to the undeniable shift between the signed document and the circulated interpretation. Family members present felt the strain acutely. Loyalties divided not along bloodlines, but along philosophy. Some urged caution, fearing that pushing this confrontation further could fracture public confidence at a delicate time. Others quietly supported her, recognizing the deeper issue at stake. This was no longer about internal embarrassment. It was about whether a duke's final words could be reshaped for convenience. The emotional undercurrent was palpable: grief colliding with suspicion, legacy clashing with institutional self-preservation. Anne's demand was uncompromising: a forensic legal review, independent, comprehensive. She insisted that every draft, every amendment, every advisory note be examined without filter. It was a bold move, one that risked exposing more than just testament discrepancies, because if a review confirmed intentional reinterpretation, the fallout would extend beyond embarrassment. It would call into question the integrity of the advisory structure itself. By speaking so forcefully, Anne crossed a threshold. Royal protocol favors quiet negotiation, discreet compromise. Public exposure is the last resort. She understood the risk. She knew that challenging internal authority could isolate her, paint her as disruptive, even reckless. Yet she also understood something else. Silence would permanently stain her father's memory. Between comfort and conscience, she chose conscience. The room reportedly fell into a strained quiet after her final words. No resolution was reached that day. No immediate admission was made, but something shifted irreversibly. The accusation had been spoken aloud, the evidence presented. The facade of seamless continuity cracked just enough to let doubt seep through. Yet exposing the attempt was only the beginning, because the real shock lay in what Philip's untouched testament allegedly contained. What if the Duke's final testame, NT, included a clause so powerful it threatened the balance of the entire royal structure? According to Princess Anne's claims, one section previously omitted from official briefings outlined a vision for the monarchy that shifted influence in ways certain officials could not accept. And that single clause may explain why someone risked everything to alter it. At the center of the controversy lies what Anne has described as a directive of guardianship. Not a ceremonial title, not a symbolic nod, but a defined responsibility embedded within the testament, one that allegedly restructured advisory oversight around the sovereign. The clause, as she portrays it, did not dismantle hierarchy, but it recalibrated it. It called for an internal moral safeguard, a figure entrusted with ensuring that critical decisions aligned with long-term constitutional stability rather than short-term convenience. In essence, it created a counterbalance within the palace ecosystem. The implications were profound. Succession planning would remain intact, but advisory authority would no longer operate unchecked. Strategic decisions would face an added layer of review, not from external critics, but from within the royal circle itself. If implemented as written, this clause could have limited the quiet dominance of certain long-standing power brokers. It would not remove them, but it would restrict their unilateral influence. And for individuals accustomed to shaping outcomes without scrutiny, that subtle boundary may have felt like an existential threat. Why would Philip include such a provision? Those close to Anne believe it was born not from distrust, but from foresight. He had witnessed generational transitions before. He understood how institutional comfort can breed complacency. In his final months, he reportedly spoke of resilience not as rigidity, but as principled adaptability. The guardianship clause, if it existed in its original form, reflected that philosophy. It was a safeguard against erosion, a reminder that the monarchy's strength lies not in secrecy, but in integrity. Resistance, however, does not always arrive with open opposition. It arrives quietly, through reinterpretation, through delay, through framing that emphasizes practicality over principle. According to Anne's claims, the guardianship directive was reframed as advisory suggestion rather than binding instruction. Its teeth were dulled, its scope narrowed. Presented publicly, it appeared innocuous, but in its original wording, it allegedly carried weight, enough weight to redirect how authority flowed behind palace doors. As whispers of this hidden clause began to circulate beyond private chambers, speculation intensified. Commentators questioned whether the monarchy had attempted to sidestep its own internal reform. Supporters rallied behind the idea of structural accountability, skeptics warned of destabilizing the institution during a sensitive era. What had once been an internal dispute over drafting language evolved into a broader conversation about transparency. And transparency, in a monarchy built on mystique, is both shield and sword. The reputational tremor was subtle at first. Carefully worded statements emphasized unity. Official sources downplayed discrepancies as routine clarifications. Yet the absence of full disclosure only amplified suspicion. If the guardianship clause was insignificant, why not release its exact wording? If revisions were procedural, why resist independent examination? Each unanswered question widened the fissure between perception and reassurance. For Anne, the clause represented more than legal nuance. It symbolized her father's final act of stewardship. To see it softened or sidelined was to witness his cautionary wisdom being reduced to optional guidance. That, she believed, would undermine not only his legacy, but the monarchy's moral foundation. As word of the hidden clause spread, pressure mounted not just inside the palace, but beyond its gates. When royal secrets leak, they don't stay contained. The public response to Anne's revelation has been swift and intense. Questions of transparency, loyalty, and legacy dominate headlines. For many, this isn't just about a will, it's about whether the monarchy honors its own principles. And for the first time, palace officials find themselves answering not to the crown, but to the court of public opinion. The media surge was immediate and relentless. Analysts dissected timelines. Legal commentators debated the boundaries between revision and manipulation. Former palace insiders hinted at long-standing internal tensions that had never before reached daylight. What began as a family dispute transformed into a national conversation about trust. The monarchy, so accustomed to controlling its narrative through measured statements and ceremonial calm, suddenly found itself reacting rather than directing. Public demand for transparency intensified by the hour. Citizens who once accepted discretion as tradition began asking for documentation. If there were two interpretations of Philip's final wishes, which one reflected his authentic voice, why had certain clauses been reframed, and who authorized the refinements? These were not radical questions, they were reasonable ones. Yet within a system built on quiet continuity, reasonable questions can feel revolutionary. Social platforms became arenas of debate. Some argued that Anne's actions were reckless, that airing internal disputes risked destabilizing an institution already navigating generational change. Others praised her as a guardian of integrity, the one figure willing to confront opacity rather than protect it. Her image shifted almost overnight from disciplined royal stalwart to principled whistleblower. That transformation carried weight, because if Anne, known for restraint, was sounding the alarm, many believed the issue must be serious. Inside palace leadership, strain deepened. Official statements attempted to reassure without conceding ground. Language emphasized unity, procedural accuracy, respect for the Duke's memory. But reassurance without full disclosure felt incomplete. Each carefully crafted sentence was passed for omission as much as for clarity. The leadership now faced an impossible balancing act: defend institutional credibility without appearing defensive, maintain privacy without appearing evasive. The risk of long-term reputational damage loomed larger than the immediate controversy. Monarchies survive on symbolism. They are sustained by the belief that tradition is anchored in unwavering principle. If that belief fractures, even slightly, the ripple effects extend far beyond one document. International observers watched closely. Commentators speculated about internal reform, about generational shifts in how authority is exercised. The debate expanded from Philip's testament to the monarchy's evolving identity. For Anne, the public reaction was both validating and burdensome. Support strengthened her resolve, but scrutiny intensified the stakes. She had not spoken to ignite a media storm. She had spoken to defend her father's clarity. Yet now her stand carried national consequence. Every silence, every word, every perceived alliance became part of the unfolding narrative. What makes this moment so pivotal is not outrage alone, It is reflection. The public is not merely scandalized, it is questioning. Questioning whether loyalty means protecting image or protecting truth. Questioning whether legacy is honored through secrecy or safeguarded through accountability. And those questions cannot be easily dismissed. But amid the public storm, a quieter battle unfolds within the family itself, a reckoning that could permanently alter the monarchy's inner circle. At the heart of every constitutional crisis lies something deeply human: family. Princess Anne's stand has drawn invisible lines between loyalty to legacy and loyalty to institution. Some see her as defending her father's honor, others fear she has exposed fractures too deep to mend. And as the dust begins to settle, one question looms over the crown itself: who truly guards the guardian? Behind closed doors, conversations have grown heavier, more deliberate. Senior royals who once moved in quiet alignment now navigate careful pauses and measured phrasing. No one wants open division, yet silence carries its own tension. For some, Anne's decision to confront the advisory structure feels like a necessary correction, a moral stand taken at personal risk. For others, it feels like a destabilizing force, threatening unity at a moment when cohesion is essential. The divide is not theatrical, it is subtle, and that subtlety makes it more dangerous. The emotional weight of confronting what she perceives as institutional betrayal has not left Anne untouched. She is not immune to consequence. To challenge the machinery that has sustained the monarchy for generations is to risk isolation within it. Yet those who know her speak of a familiar pattern: when principle collides with comfort, she does not hesitate long. Her reputation has always rested on steadiness, on the refusal to bend simply for optics. In this crisis, that same steadiness has become both shield and lightning rod. Within the family, loyalties are layered. Blood binds them, but responsibility complicates them. Some fear that continuing the confrontation will deepen public skepticism. Others quietly acknowledge that transparency, though painful, may be the only path forward. The monarchy now stands at a crossroads between tradition and accountability. For decades, discretion has been its armor, but armor can become isolation if it resists necessary adaptation. Anne's stand has forced that uncomfortable reflection into the open. The long-term consequences are impossible to ignore. If a forensic review proceeds and confirms discrepancies, advisory governance may be reshaped permanently. Oversight mechanisms could tighten. Decision-making processes may become more structured, less reliant on informal influence. Alternatively, if the establishment resists reform, the fracture between public expectation and palace practice could widen. Either path carries weight. Either path alters the internal rhythm of royal authority. And still, beneath policy and procedure, the human cost lingers. Grief has never been fully separated from governance in this saga. Philip's absence is not abstract, it is personal. For Anne, defending his testament is not political theatre, it is filial duty. In protecting what she believes to be his unaltered intent, she is also protecting the version of him that history might otherwise blur. That emotional core fuels her resolve. Yet there are whispers that this chapter is not closed, that further documents may surface, that additional clauses could raise new questions about advisory power and succession safeguards. The tension has not dissipated, it has merely shifted shape. What began as a dispute over phrasing now stands as a referendum on how the monarchy balances loyalty with truth. If this crisis has revealed anything, it is that legacy is not passive. It demands vigilance, it demands courage, and sometimes it demands confrontation from within. The institution may endure, but it will not emerge unchanged, because once a question about integrity is spoken aloud, it cannot be unheard. And if Princess Anne has proven anything through this unprecedented exposure, it is that some legacies are not inherited, they are defended, no matter the cost. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.